Hi, I'm Jackie Perkins, and I'd love to introduce myself and welcome you to our sixth and final series of our leadership learning series, Feedback, delivering it, asking for it, and receiving it. So if you remember in our leadership series number 5, Coaching for Success, we spoke about the fact that we want to set people up for success by coaching proactively. But remember, when we coach people, we are human beings. We are not necessarily going to get it right first time. What does FAIL stand for? F-A-I-L. What does it stand for? First attempt in learning. So for those of you that have had children or have a very young child that's just learning to walk, remember when they took that first step and then they fell over? Did you do one? Oh, great job! You took your first step. Awesome! Let's see more of that. Or did you go, stick to sitting. You weren't meant for walking. Let's just give up on that one. No, you encourage them. Now, this is what we want to do with feedback. We want to say, we understand when you try something for the first time, it's probably that you're going to fail because it's your first attempt in learning. And this is where our feedback becomes so critical. We need a tool that's going to provide feedback to encourage people to keep on trying and doing more of the stuff we want to see and less of the stuff we don't want to see, but in a way where we really keep that relationship strong. So I'm going to share a brilliant little tool with you to help you do that. So here is the little tool. Very simple, very straightforward. The way to remember it is, back in the good old days when you were at school, when you did something really well, your teacher would give you a gold star. Yes? So we are going to give a gold star to anyone who does something really, really well. So what does STAR stand for? The S stands for situation. And just to give you a little bit of clarity around that, the situation is the context. So the context could be, Jackie, in your role as team leader for GHD Hair, you are required to run a number of education sessions. So that's the situation. The T stands for task. So it's the actual job that you want to give feedback on. So, Jackie, I happen to notice you running an education session for your team, and I'd like to give you some feedback on that. So that's the task. The A stands for action, or another word for that is behavior. And behavior is what we say and do. So this is crucially important. Say and do. So what did I hear and what did I see? Now, I want you just to make a little note of this. You want to spend 80% of your time in the action phase, because this is the behavior we want to reinforce, or it's the behavior we want to change. And the last one is result. Result. Another word for result is impact. And I want you to think about what impact did that action have on the team, for instance, or on the client, for instance, or on the person, or on the organization. What was the impact of their action? Dr. Bren Brown, one of my favorite people that I follow, she is on my list of favorite resources that I'm going to suggest you have a look at, makes a really, really powerful statement. She said, it's kind to be clear and it's unkind to be unclear. So I'm going to suggest that there are 2 types of feedback that we need to be giving. We need to be giving feedback for improvement, where people have fallen off the bus, they've failed, and they need to get back on the bus. And there's positive reinforcement feedback. What are we reinforcing? We're reinforcing the behavior we want to see more of. Feedback for improvement, what behavior do we want to see changed? So I'm going to ask you a question. In your leadership role, we have to give two types of feedback. We give feedback on KPIs and we give feedback on behaviors. Tell me, which one is easier to give feedback on? Yeah, KPIs. Why? Because it's tangible, it's measurable, it is objective. But when it comes to behaviors, we could be interpreting these behaviors very differently. And this is where we could often be accused of bullying, harassment, discrimination. So it's imperative that we have a tool that allows us to reflect what did the person actually say and do, as opposed to our assumption or our story about that behavior. So let's go back to positive reinforcement. I'm going to give you a gold star because you've done something amazing. But instead of rocking up and saying, hey, Jackie, awesome, you rock, fantastic, I'm going to actually use this tool. So, Jackie, as your job as a team leader at GHD Hair, you're required to provide education to your team on a regular basis. I noticed you chairing a meeting with your team, and I just wanted to give you some feedback. You had a very good agenda. You stuck to the agenda. You gave everyone an opportunity to contribute. You engaged everyone. You summarized every key point. You asked for opinions. You answered every question. You stuck to the timelines. And as a result, the team was engaged and committed to the outcome, and we had some really productive discussions that came out of it, some really good suggestions that the business can use. So listen how different that was to, awesome job, Jackie, you rock. I now have clearly demonstrated what behavior I liked and what behavior I want to see more of. Also, it clearly indicates to your team that you have watched it and you've observed it and you've taken it seriously and you haven't just blown smoke up their bum to keep them happy, but it's a genuine intent at giving feedback on what they've done. So now they've got their gold star. Now I'm going to up the ante. I'm just pushing you a little bit here. Do you remember in our leadership series number 2, adapting your leadership style? We spoke about adapting your style to deal with the different personality profiles. So how we deal with an eagle, how we deal with an owl or a dove or a peacock. So when it comes to impact, I want you to think about what is the impact for an eagle. If we say to the eagle, well done, as a result of your actions, the team morale is really high, the eagle's going to go, yeah, nice. But if I said, well done, as a result of your actions, we've now hit our deadline 3 weeks earlier and within budget, eagle's going to go, yeah, that turns me on. If I was going to give feedback to a peacock, and I said, as a result of your actions, we've really raised the profile of our education team within the business, the peacock's going to go, yeah, raise the profile, my reputation, my visibility. I love that. So we've got to remember to tweak the impact in a way that that bird goes, yep, that floats my boat. I'm going to want to do more of that. Now, let's say we need to give feedback for improvement. Not so easy. But we're still going to use the star, but this time we're not going to give a gold star. We're going to give a star. That's how you're going to remember it. So someone stuffs up, star, So what we do is, the R is double A. So we're going to use the same example. So Jackie, as your job as a team leader for the education team at GHD Hair, you're required to run meetings on educating your team. The action you took, there was no clear agenda. You didn't give anyone an opportunity to contribute. You ran way over time, and when people did ask questions, you said that we didn't have time to answer them. As a result, no one in the team was committed or engaged to the outcomes or to the decisions that had been made, as they felt they hadn't been able to influence them. Now, we can't leave it there, because all this person has heard is what they've done wrong, and we haven't given them an opportunity to know what they can do to get it right. So the A now stands for alternative action. alternative action. So alternative action is next time, Jackie, I would suggest you have a clear agenda with strict timelines. You encourage everyone to ask questions. You give everyone an opportunity to have their questions answered. And in that way, alternative results. So alternative result. In that way, we are more likely to have a committed, engaged team of people that are committed to the decisions that come out of the meeting. Now, again, I'm going to up the ante. I'm going to suggest for the AA that you act like Socrates. You act like Socrates. So if you remember in Coaching for Success, we spoke about Socrates, who said, I cannot teach you anything. I can only make you stop and think. So if you're going to stop and think, I need to really make sure that I don't tell you what you do. I'm going to ask you. So tell me, Jackie, what do you think you could do differently next time? And talk me through, Jackie, what you think the improved outcome would be. So instead of telling, you're going to ask. So one final example around the star R. I'm going to use this model exactly as it's laid out, but I want you to listen very carefully to my language. And I want you to tell me what I'm doing incorrectly here. So Jackie, as your role as team leader of the education team at GHD here, you're required to run a number of education sessions. I noticed that when you ran the meeting, you were quite offish to the people in the room. You were quite abrupt and you were quite dismissive. As a result, people disengaged and weren't committed to the outcomes. Now, did you hear the language that I used? You were abrupt, you were dismissive, and you were offish. Those words are classified as stories. They are classified as opinions. Because that person is now going to go away and go, well, what do you mean by offish? What do you mean by dismissive? What do you mean by abrupt? And they go and run the meeting in the exact same way again because they have not understood what you mean by that. Or worse, they decide you are actually discriminating against them, or you're bullying them, or you are harassing them, or you've been unkind to them, and they go marching off to HR and say, oh, my leader's been so mean and unkind to me. They've called me rude and abrupt and dismissive, and I'm not like that at all. So we need to really be making sure, did I use language what you did and what you said? Abrupt, dismissive is not what you did or what you said. So Jackie, I'd just like to give you some feedback. In that meeting, when one of your members asked a question, you rolled your eyes. When one of your team members asked a question, you responded with, we don't have time for that. When one of your team members asked a question, you said, that's a stupid question. All of those can be interpreted as you not taking them seriously or being dismissive. Can we look at how you could have handled that meeting differently? Can you hear the difference? What did they do? What did they say? Instead of saying, you are rude, you are abrupt, you are dismissive. What did they do? What did they say? So now let's pull all of this together in terms of asking for feedback. As leaders, we've also got to manage up. Would you agree? And many of us don't get sufficient feedback. So when we want feedback from our managers, we've got the perfect tool to get that. So instead of saying, hey, I need more feedback, I'm not getting enough feedback, we want to go to our managers and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is the job that I'm working on. This is the project that it's part of, and this is the action I'm taking. I'd love your feedback on what you think I'm doing well and what you think I could be doing differently. I'd love to hear your input on what you think the impact is of what I'm doing. So you make it very easy for your managers to give you feedback. They're not giving you feedback because they can't be bothered. Often they don't realize you need it, you want it, care for it, or maybe they don't have the skills. So we make it easier for them by saying, this is what I'm working on, this is the project, this is what I'm doing. What do you think I'm doing well? What would you like me to do differently? What would you like me to do more of? If you are receiving feedback and you find that maybe this feedback doesn't make sense to you, thank you so much for the feedback. May I just clarify? What job are you specifically referring to when you gave me that feedback? What did I specifically do or say that you felt was inappropriate? And what would you like me to do differently in future? Instead of just receiving feedback that's vague and generalized, respond with thank you for your feedback. In order for me to improve, I need to know exactly what I did and said that was inappropriate. I need to understand the impact of it, and I'd like to understand what I could do differently. And in that way, you take charge of vague, generalized behavior and feedback and turn it into something that you can use and make sure that you get some benefit from it. The challenge is this. I'm going to give you a cryptic little clue here. I'm going to write up 2 numbers for you. 5 versus 3, or a ratio of 5 to 3. What do you think this is referring to? So Malcolm Gladwell has written a number of books, and one of the books he talks about the formula for high-performing teams when it comes to feedback is we need to ensure that for every 5 positive feedback, we give 3 feedback for improvement. So out of every 8 pieces of feedback we give, 5 of them need to be positively reinforcing behavior and 3 of them feedback for improvement. So we don't want to only be giving feedback that is positive, and we certainly don't only want to be giving feedback that is all constructive. There has to be a balance, but this is the magic number. So really think to yourself, am I giving more positive feedback and not enough constructive feedback? Or am I only giving constructive feedback and not enough positive feedback? How can I be more deliberate about the feedback that I give? Now, I'm going to give you the best little tip in the whole wide world. If you have a performance review once a year with your team, most leaders go, oh, performance review time. I've got to sit down and prepare for it. Oh, this is such a huge job. Generally speaking, what we remember about our team members is the most recent stuff. I often say you're only as good as your last movie. All the stuff that they really messed up. So the way that you're going to have the best performance review is you're going to create a little star folder for every one of your team members. And every time they get a gold star, you're going to make a little note of it in that format, STAR, and put it in their folder. Every time you need to give them a star R, you're going to make a little note of it and put it in their folder. So that when it comes to their performance review, you've got a whole beautiful collation of the entire year's performance all documented. So this is the analogy that I'd like to use. What if your partner had to say to you, tell me about your team leader or one of your team members, Jackie. What is she like? And you responded with, I've got a photograph of her somewhere. I'll show you. It's on LinkedIn. Okay, now I know what she's like because I've seen a photograph. That's a snapshot. Now, when we do a performance review where we don't have a photo album of examples, we're giving a review based on a snapshot. But when we have an album full of stars and star R's, we actually have a photo album. So if you just had one photograph of me standing here right now, you'd create a certain impression of me. But if you had to look at my photo albums where maybe one day you see a photo of me 9 months pregnant with my 3rd child, another day on a Sunday morning in my pajamas with a hangover, another day a picture of me camping, you start to get a broad spectrum of who I am. Now, this is what we want to be doing with our team members. When we run that performance review, we want to have a photo album of snapshots of stars and star R's so they get a real, well-rounded, genuine, sincere performance review. My encouragement to you would be to suggest to your team members to start collecting their own stars. Every time they get good feedback, make a note of it. Every time they get constructive feedback, make a note of it so they can participate in these performance reviews. So when we look at this and pull it all together, the final little thing that I would like to talk about is formal consequences versus natural consequences. So what if we find ourselves in a situation where we have been giving star R's after star R's after star R's, and we say, oh, I'm not getting any improvement. This person is just not coming to the party. I'm going to have to implement performance disciplinary procedures. I'm just going to suggest that there's a little interim step that we could be using before we go down this formal path. So I'm going to suggest you make a note of formal consequences and natural consequences. So what are formal consequences and what are natural consequences? Let me use the story of Nick Kyrgios. So Nick Kyrgios is our Australian tennis player, and he is famous for his quite robust out there personality. So at one of the Grand Slam tournaments, he was losing. He decided that he would throw his opponent off the game by telling his opponent in the break that his partner was shagging someone else on the tennis circuit. So the tennis board fined him $5,000. So is that natural or formal? It's a formal consequence. Now my question to you is, what impact did that have on Nick Kyrgios? Well, very little, because he's a multimillionaire. But let's look at the personality profile of Nick Kyrgios. If you had to take a guess at whether he was an eagle, a dove, an owl, or a peacock, which bird profile do you think he's likely to fit? More than likely, I would hazard a guess at being a peacock. And what is important to peacocks? Reputation, visibility, profile. So the next morning, when he walked onto the court, all the crowd booed. Formal or natural? That's a natural consequence. So which one do you think had more impact? Well, the natural consequence had more impact. So when it comes to managing your team's performance, if you find that you're giving star R after star R after star R and you're not seeing improvement, I'm going to suggest that you look at natural consequences. Formal consequences is what I, as your leader, am going to do to you if you do not comply. This is what the company, the business, is going to do to you if you do not comply. So I almost position you as a victim. Natural consequences is what's going to naturally happen to you should you choose to continue to behave the way you're behaving. So don't change to make me happy. Don't change to make the company happy. Don't change to make management happy. Change because your behavior is going to benefit you. And the question is your behavior working for you? And if it's not, how can you change it so that you're getting the outcomes that are important to you? And sometimes just by flipping it on its head and saying, clearly you're not getting the results you want, let's look at what you could be choosing to do differently that's going to work for you. And then it puts them in a position of empowerment, taking charge of their success, taking charge of their development, taking charge of getting themselves back on the bus, rather than a form of threat as to what I'm going to do to you. So let's look at some of our coaching questions to wrap this session up. These are some questions that I would like you to ask yourself as a reflection on everything that we've learned in this session today. First question, how regularly are you giving positive feedback? How regularly are you giving feedback for improvement? Are you using the 5 versus 3 methodology? How do you unpack the action and the behavior? Are you really making sure you're using language around what they did and said rather than assumptions and opinions? Ask yourself, are you stating facts or are you actually stating stories? So let's go back to that little example I used right in the very beginning. Eleanor came to work 3 days in a row late. Fact or story? It's a fact, it's observable, we could see it, we could measure it. Eleanor is disengaged and doesn't give a damn about her job and is lazy. That is a story, it's an assumption, we have no idea. How can you adapt the use of the star to the individual disc profile? So remember, using the impact that is important to the eagle, how the impact is actually going to be different for a dove. So really tweaking it that it makes sense to your different bird types. What is the difference between formal and natural consequences? So before we jump into performance management procedures with formal consequences, written warnings, etc., let's tap into that person's needs and desires and wants and motivators and say, what's important to you? And is your choice of behavior working for you? Is it getting you where you want to go? And if it's not, what could you be doing differently for yourself? Don't do it for me. Don't do it for the management team. Don't do it for the business. Do it for yourself. And then finally, I'm really going to encourage you to look at a fantastic model called the SCARF model, C-S-C-A-R-F, the SCARF model by Dr. David Rock. There's numerous YouTube clips on it and articles. They're on my favorite resources and in my coaching tools. I'm going to encourage you to have a look at that because that would really help you with working with natural consequences as opposed to formal consequences. Please don't forget my supporting tools. The coaching tools are available for you on the website. My favorite resources are available there for you. If you'd like the PowerPoints, flick me an email and I'll happily send them to you. And if you would like some virtual one-on-one coaching or group coaching to customize these techniques specific to you and your team, I'd be more than happy to help you. Just give me a call or send me an email. Until next time, you know what to do. Be bold and be curious.